But I wanted to pull on one thread that you mentioned there, which is like the receivers and tight ends and how they fit into this, because I just broke down Puka Nacua for reception perception, and like I was talking to James Coe about this, where like what he like you look at his route tree and like his alignment data, it makes like no sense, because his route tree sort of kind of looks like what you'd think of like almost like a big slot receiver, like a power slot receiver, or even like a small slot, really. But he didn't quite like line up that way, because he lines up kind of all over the place, right? But it's because he gets so involved in the run game. And then it's crazy, Nate, to watch. Like, I don't want to pick on George Pickens, but I'm going to pick on George Pickens here a little bit, where it's like, he gets like hyped up for these like crazy blocks on like the backside of run formations.
On the backside.
Always on the backside of run formations. The
backside. I have a folder just in case anyone ever comes at me about this. I have a folder of
bad
George Pickens blocking. Bad blocking. I mean, like missing assignments and all that stuff. I have a folder. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So it's frustrating to like watch offenses like that, and because it's not just George Pickens, and it's not just like, I would even say like one of my favorite players, like Stephon Diggs. There's a lot of moments where it's like, what are we doing here from blocking perspective? You know,
big
like,
old lay guy. Yeah, he was big holding up.
We're doing this. Yeah. I think I've even talked to Diggs about that at one point over the years. But it's like it's funny to watch like how some of these teams, it doesn't just come down to what the running back is doing. It also comes down to like, you got to have receivers that have this like mindset that Puka has, the buy-in. And like, I think you see that with a lot of the Packers guys. And like, this will at some point, it's not going to be the most obvious thing we think of when we're trying to like sort through receiver rooms, or we're trying to scout receivers in the draft or anything like that. But it's gonna matter when we're talking about like trying to figure out who's gonna play in a crowded receiver room like the Packers, who's gonna play more. Some of this stuff about like what can they do to use you as a blocker, that's gonna matter.
Yeah, if you want to figure out young guys, running backs, it's can they pass protect? That's gonna be the number one thing, if they see the field or not. And then for receivers, it's can you line up inside and outside? Like, are you an outside guy that can line up inside, vice versa? Can you win at the one, or are you gonna block? Like, can we put you in there just to sprinkle in some snaps, sprinkling in some reps? Like, can you pin this D end? And the Shanahan guys, and even Bruce Arians, who is his own kind of tree, what those guys did with the receivers, this is just the human element of football and sports and everything, is, you're going to block 7 times. We're going to make you block a safety over and over. But once we get inside the 10, you're getting a touchdown. Like, we're going to reward you with a pass play that's going to juice your stats a little bit. So like they're very good at doing that. And I know it's because some of these guys don't want to do it.
No.
and that's what's been so cool about Brandon Ayuk, is that it clicked for him this year. And now he's like awesome at it. Like, he went from a negative to plus.
I maintain, and like I say this as a guy that was big on Ayuk going into his second year, and
I should say day one, but day 2.
but really, like, because I was like, man, he was awesome as a rookie, and some of the route running still like that wild horse style that I think you and I have talked about previously, but like, I was like, man, but it works for him. He gets separation, like, and you can see the flashes. He gets open one way or another. He's such a freak show that I was so high on him going into his second season that then that week 1 big reveal of like, oh my God, this guy's not playing. Like, what's going on here? He's in the doghouse. And then I swear to God, like, he got out of that just because he started blocking his ass off. Like, and so that was sort of like, I know that people like it's a fantasy show, and sometimes like people's eyes start glazing over when you talk about receiver blocking.
My brand.
But I'm telling you, it matters in the long run. In the long run, it matters a lot.
And if you want your running back on your fantasy team to, get yards, the receivers have to block
especially explosive plays.
And exactly. And it's hidden yards too. It's the 4 yards becomes 6, and it's like, okay, that's only 2 yards, but do that 10 times. 3 yards becomes 4, 5 yards becomes 7. Like, like that, those hidden yards add up. And Christian McCaffrey of the world, or what the Falcons were probably thinking last year with Bijan going, like, Algier was hitting singles and doubles. Now we're hitting triples. Like, that was their thinking, like that, to do that. But then you also have to get the blocks first. The 49ers hit it perfectly. The Falcons kind of went up and down. As anyone listened to my old show knew about the constant check-ins on the Falcons offense. But it's in the run game, it's the usual strains are, the initial double teams. Where are the double teams at? Are there double teams? Defenses want to take away double teams. What's the number count? A receiver on a non-DB, you always want to do like bodies. So if you want to keep him on a safety or a corner, if he has to block a linebacker, it's like, it's better be worth it. It better be like a key play or a D end, or a tight end blocking an edge player, which we've kind of addressed. And again, it's been cool to kind of see how teams make this happen, because defenses have become more intelligent than ever at defending the staples of NFL offenses, especially because all these Shanahan guys proliferate around the league. So now it's like, all that bootleg stuff that 10 years ago was gashing everybody. Well, now everyone just crashes the D end as hard as they can at the quarterback. And they say, we're going to just knock them out if you try those bootlegs. So like, they take away these natural staples. And so the offenses, I think, are finally going like, oh, okay, the pass game, we've maxed out a little bit. All right, now we got to diversify the run game a little bit. And it's cool to see the Eye of Sauron move there and see the innovation happen there. Like, I'll just bring like one little example. Like the Dolphins did this, the Cardinals did this, and the Packers did this, which is a split zone block. Is a tight end is usually off the ball, and it's a zone run, but he crosses the formation and kicks out the backside D end or edge player and man on the line of scrimmage. And that is a split zone. Everyone runs it. It's probably the number one run play in college, just because of formation stuff. So defenses go, oh, why off? Well, that means he might be slicing across here. So we can do this. We can have adjustment for that. So and again, this sounds so simple, but it takes time. It takes innovation. It takes some balls to try this.
Yeah.
They just said, well, let's have the tight end just go like loop back and like kick out the same side. So that same dual example I brought up where they kind of switch the strength of the run, that's what they're doing with the split zone. So just think of a guy winding back and kicking out the same side he started at. It just changes the strength of the split zone run. And again, defenses, it pops their brains because they're like, what? You're coming back? Yeah. you're kicking me out? So it's just changing what can be available from different formations and different looks. And I want to see what gets copied, because I do think a lot's going to get copied.
Yeah, and it's funny when you think of we're going to talk about teams in the second half that were like the bottom 3 run games from last year.
Okay.
And you talk about like all of these innovations and all of these sort of like those wrinkles there with the tight ends and everything like that. It's so stark when you look at some, like I'll talk about the Chargers specifically, where like I've spent a lot of time watching Chargers football because obviously I was doing the show with Austin Eckler these last few years,
just
and
watched
it's like
the game right now this morning.
And it's just like, man, there's none of that like I know people it's like I keep saying on the show, it's become almost like a trigger phrase when like we talk about the run game with the Chargers and stuff like that. Like Greg Roman says, like, man, imagine Justin Herbert with a run game. It's like, yeah, I'm not even shading Austin or any of these running backs. It's just like they were doing nothing really from a design perspective to help out that run game. I mean, those tight ends were just like it was like hilarious watching these guys try to block people.
And Kellen Moore, it's so funny because he could be innovative in certain ways, and then in the run game, he's very traditional. It's very line up. This is what we're running, and we run the traditional runs. Which at times with the Cowboys, I was always like, yeah, just line up and play, baby. Just throw that 102 mile an hour fastball.
What if you got that line? You can do that.
What if you only throw 88? You're just trying to throw fastballs. Yeah, it's not going to It's not going to work as well. So that's kind of what the Chargers run game was last year.
Exactly. And we'll definitely be talking about some Eagles in the second half too. But so I kind of I think we've been talking around this a little bit, just like how to weaponize the run game, because it kind of reminds me, Nate, of the conversation you and I had on Mock Draft Monday on the show, a couple months ago or whatever. It feels like 100 years ago, but just a couple months ago when we were talking about which draft season feels like a different lifetime ago somehow.
It does.
What is time really? When we were talking about like you were mocking Amarius Mims to the 49ers, and I thought, to me, is like they have really weaponized Trent Williams as their left tackle, and they're therefore weaponizing their run game. But I think a lot of this is just like, how do you pursue explosive plays in the run game? Because again, thinking like 8 years ago, it was all the big brain thing to say was like, well, passing gives you more explosive plays than running the ball. And that is true. That is just a fact. That's the reality.
Yeah.
Yards per pass attempt will always be higher than yards per carry. It will always be the case. And then, especially like yards per completion or anything like that, it's always going to be higher than rushing plays. But I think that just saying that on its own, this is sometimes my problem with like certain, like the way we do things with numbers. Sometimes it's like saying that alone should not just be like the period end of the sentence. It should be like ... How do we make the run game Right. Not that explosive, but more explosive. And I think we've seen teams do that recently. Top 5 teams last year in explosive rushing plays, explosive rushing yards, according to Fantasy Points data. Miami Dolphins. It's funny that you keep bringing up the Cardinals because eyeball emoji. They're number 2 here. The Baltimore Ravens, San Francisco 49ers, and the Detroit Lions. All these teams are the only ones in the NFL to clear 600 explosive rush yards. Ironically, other than the Cardinals, all these teams were good last year, just from a bottom line perspective. So I guess my question, Nate, again, we've sort of mentioned some of these things already, but like, how do teams like further weaponize the run game and kind of, push back on that conventional wisdom of like, when you go for explosives, it's pass plays. When you're just trying to pick up yards, it's run plays.
Yeah. It's for me, it's always explosive play rate, not just as pass rate or rush rate. It's just play rate, just get that up. And again, an explosive run traditionally is only 12 yards, not 16. So that also helps juice the numbers a little bit. Number one thing, the easiest answer is a QB that can run. I should say that's an actual weapon in the run game. The Ravens are up there for it's no mistake why they are up there. But you hear the other teams that are up there. You said Dolphins, you said 49ers, and then who else was up there? The
Lions.
Lions too.
And your Cardinals.
The Cardinals all feature the most diverse run games in the NFL. Every single one of them. You have, and I know, again, those are a couple teams that are like, oh, what is it, Shanahan? It's like, no, yeah, he's running trap. He's running different versions of zone like he always has, but he runs counter as much as anybody now. He throws in a little bit more duo now too. The Lions are the most diverse run game you'll ever watch, especially in the modern NFL. They get away with it because their O-line is just awesome. And their O-line coach is very, very good. And Hank Fraley. And then like Dolphins were the other one. It's kind of fun to see, okay, they're doing, it's cool watching the Shanahan guys kind of proliferate around, LaFleur, McVay, McDaniel, Shanahan himself, and just they do the same plays, but now they all have their different identities with it, like just different shifts. You watch the Dolphins 49ers, they're running so much of the same stuff, but it feels so different,
right? How
they're getting there, and same with the Packers and same with the Rams. So that is like the Dolphins is just speed. It's like that receiver I brought up before, when you have more pullers, it's more boom bust. The number one, to me, explosive play that got here, it's actually tying in basically everything we just talked into, was the pin pull play, which is where someone has to pin down, usually a tight end traditionally, and then someone pulls around him, usually a tackle. You can have 2 pullers as well. But now it's the receiver pinning on the open side on the D end. That to me has been the number one play that's opened up explosive plays. It's hard for me to, with the stats that I have available to me, to go like, just when the receiver is pinning, what is this explosive player, and everything is just pin pull. But that is the type of play that I think copied more, but it ties into what we're saying. You need buy-in from the receivers. An underrated thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown, dude's a nasty blocker.
Yeah, 100%.
Dude is an awesome blocker. He opens up as much for the run game for the Lions as he does in the pass game. So that's something that's just, it's kind of been kind of underrated with him. So probably not on this show, but with maybe the general fan. But all these guys, they have buy-in from receivers. They have a quarterback. Really just the Ravens have a quarterback that can contribute, but they have diverse run games. And I think that's the biggest thing.
That receiver point is, again, it just matters so much. And
So much.
I called Amon-Ra St. Brown Bud like Cooper Kupp before he got drafted by the Lions, because like I thought he would project well into that like Cooper Kupp style role. He ends up getting drafted obviously by the Lions, who Brad Holmes with the Rams. They have the old Rams quarterback. Like there was so much synergy there. Still kicking myself for not drafting enough of him in Dynasty, even though I thought
it's unbelievable. And I really liked him too. I'm in 5 leagues. I have him in 1 league, and I was like, I loved him.
Yeah. Well, what can you say? I'm an idiot, but I mean, but that thought at least was at least smart, and I think, but like
good process.
Good process. Hopefully benefited people that follow my work, not me. That's the goal. That's the goal, really, of like any good analyst, right? I'm not going to really benefit from this, but hopefully a lot of people out there did. Yeah. But that I think is something I've got to like kind of teach myself over and over again, even though I know this. Like when I think about like veteran receivers, my instant kind of thought is like, okay, well, they're kind of losing some gas as an outside receiver. Let's kick them into the slot because like they still, and it's funny, we talked about Diggs, right? This is going to be an interesting thing with him in Houston because like Nico just gets paid shout out to Nico Collins, who's you know just a stud. But he's like he's an X receiver. He plays the X receiver position, and like Tank Dell was so good on the outside last year, and we're talking about like blocking out and blocking up in the run game. Tank Dell ain't gonna do that at like 100. Nope. That everybody's all mad at what
happened last year.
Yeah, everybody's all mad at the Texans for that. Which I've watched that play from all 22 angles. Like what? That's just the stuff.
It's a
happens
simple
thing.
Run play. It was just like I know. It's like you got rolled up on. It's like I know. I got to it with a friend on a show where we were talking about what's his face Xavier Worthy.
Yeah,
and I was just like, well, he's like, well, just don't have him block. And then I go, so that's it?
What do you want to
take out those plays? That's it. He's in, he runs. Like, that's it. And so
then you're going to be complaining that he's playing like 45% of the snaps. So yeah.
And wow, they're a lot less efficient when he's on the field. It's like, maybe defenses are teeing off on that tendency. So I know. So the receiver size could be a whole podcast in itself and a conversation.
100%. But it's my thought with all that has been like, well, then Diggs probably is the most natural guy to play the slot because which he's done.
But it's not as good, right?
It's not the same. I think it's just going to be really interesting. And right, like we talked again, he's kind of that the Toro blocker or whatever, right? So how are we going to be able, the Texans, who I think, maybe for the Texans it doesn't really matter because like they just need to not be one of the worst rushing teams in the league to like take that next step as an offense because Stroud is so good and they have a good offensive design I think Slowick's gotten a little like overrated through the process of this, and it's like they were just running a pretty normal Shanahan offense. And when you have a great quarterback, they're just they're just playing the hits, baby, and like that's great when you have CJ Stroud at quarterback. But I think they just need to not be like a horrible run game. So maybe they don't need to worry about like Stephon Diggs blocking to weaponize the run game. But I think for a lot of different teams, that is a thing that again we do need to have that conversation about because it matters a lot to like take the next step as a run team.
It's funny because the Texans actually last year, like it was really cool to watch the receivers buy in so much. And they had like with Robert Woods, of course, helps out with that. But like John Mechie and stuff, like right away, they were all buying in. Like Nico was trying to clothesline guys and it was like, sweet. Yeah, this is great. So, but why I want to say that is they couldn't get better in that area. Like they maxed out the receiver blocking. So I think maybe they're like, we can swap out Robert for a little more juice, just in theory, that's what I want to say. But Diggs from the slot, it's a great point because the Bills would line him up so much, him there so much because they're facing so much zone coverage. So they were like in cover 2 and stuff. So they're like, oh, okay, well, that's why they started running the ball more. But they're like, okay, let's put Diggs in the slot more and we'll just pepper him on the inside going against linebackers and stuff. But it kind of put a cap on their offense because they kind of were they ran really limited routes for him from there. It was just like, just really just put a lower ceiling on their whole offense, which I'm sure Bills fans will talk to you about. But I think it doesn't help when your other receivers then like can't do anything outside. Right. No, and I think that won't be an issue in Houston, at least. And so now they just lined up and they just they built the whole plane out of guys that can line up on the inside. They're like, well, I guess this is where we're going to target the ball. So might as well just pepper them. We'll see how that goes.